What's up everyone, welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Video Game Fight School channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. So Digital Foundry just put out their analysis of Gotham Knights, the PC version, and are somewhat hypothesizing that maybe what they're seeing on the PC is the cost for the game not getting anything more than a 30 FPS performance, and even where it has the frame issues, even under 30 FPS, could be something that resonates with the CPU being a bottleneck in the way that the game was designed. So let's jump into this whole conversation. Let's talk a little bit, and I want to invite you guys on a journey with me to see if we can maybe get down to the meat of all of this. One thing developers don't do, and in many cases can't do, is tell us the nitty-gritty about their development process all the time. But from time to time, some things like forums, they make their way out, and we're able to glean some of the different aspects of game development. And in terms of this particular aspect, this is something that is actually much bigger than your regular general game development stuff. This is actually something that makes its way into CPU optimization and the science of the hardware technology that gets to run these video games. And so right now, I think the biggest challenge for a lot of people is that this 30 FPS thing is as a result of the developers not wanting to give 60 FPS, when there probably is the aspect of whether or not the developers can give 60 FPS on console, because it might be a thing where the technical expertise for Unreal Engine 4 is probably not widely available, and talent such as that might not be necessarily on hand to get the game optimized as it needs to be. And even still, it could be something that we've all suspected, that the game's original framework was more than likely built from ground up to follow old design paradigms in the ways that they've actually done it in the past consoles, like the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One sometimes anyways, and somehow it's not necessarily paying off with the new consoles to leverage all of the available computing in these new consoles. So it's a very complicated situation. The gentleman on Digital Foundry today talked about a lot of the CPU limitations, talked about the frame drops, talked about even some of the areas in the game where if you cap the PC version to 30 FPS, you're going to be seeing that the same frame drops are showing up on PC and console. So it doesn't even really matter what your rig is like. The game is not going to be leveraging all of the power that you have available on your computer. What's even much crazier to me, and something that I thought was actually quite, very interesting, was the fact that if you even look at the comparisons that were done on Digital Foundry today, they actually highlighted some other games like Marvel's Spider-Man and talked extensively about how a game like that, whenever you are, say, in a place where the game is getting to perform much more difficult, in a scenario, what you see is the game actually starts to, switch up its tasks and take its own time to use more of your available CPU power. That way you don't have frame drops that go crazy all the way down to like 20 frames. Instead, your, frame drops on the PC version of Spider-Man only dip up to about maybe 50 frames in some, aspects. Now, the challenge as well, too, with all of this is all these other games that have been cited and their performances are almost all single player games. But that is actually a good place to start whenever it is that you want to go ahead and start digging in to what might be the issues on hand. But here's the challenge that I wanted to invite you guys on with me. I finally was able to get my hands on a GDC talk surrounding threading and pipeline, basically a performance and memory talk at the GDC for Middle-earth Shadow of War. Now, Middle-earth Shadow of War is a single-player game, and I remember I already started looking at this video when I was looking into the optimization possibilities and the problems with Gotham Knights. I'm not necessarily somebody to sit down and be an armchair developer. I don't sit down bashing devs like some people like to do, but at the same time, it's nice for me to be able to know. So once I know, I can now bash the devs if I had to do that with evidence that they're probably holding out on doing their jobs. So that is my goal and that is my aim. So if you want to watch a video like this, I want to throw it in the comment section. You can get some popcorn, maybe go smoke a slab of meat or something, and you can probably make it through this entire talk that shows things like dedicated threading, dedicated, core, assignments to be able to run their game at 30 FPS on consoles, because remember, Middle-earth Shadow of War came out in the past generation, which is, quite impressive to see that developers actually developed in this way. Could it be that the new generations for games like Gotham Knights are, maybe making developers probably not want to do too much work because they feel like these consoles now have, better CPUs? But also the question too is, do these CPUs have better single thread performance and they rely too much on them? So all of these conversations get super, big brained in a sense. And until you start breaking them down into small pieces, do they eventually start making sense? It could also be that the way they've actually decided to design the game, because of the replication, it would have probably needed to take maybe a few more years for them to be able to go back and replicate the entire world so that you and your buddy can play multiplayer whenever you feel like it. And then that way you guys can eventually start to maybe run around the entire open world, having replicated everything, the crimes, the, assets, everything in a seamless, untethered way. Because the seamless, untethered aspect is kind of the craziest part, because I don't really know exactly how it all works, because, somebody joins your, your session or joins your game, and now they're able to run across your map and actually do activities that are spawning in real time on your map. While if they were to disconnect or whatever it is, your session continues to go on and is basically on, it's not touched. You don't really have any issues, surrounding it. And so these are so many questions that I'm here to ask, and I really would love to know, because at the end of the day, the whole conversation around optimization not only stretches towards Gotham Knights. We have a Plague Tale Requiem, who also, this game as well, is a challenging game to run overall. For those of you who've been paying very close attention to both games, you'll notice that A Plague Tale, even though it does have some sort of a performance mode, has moved itself into a place where it's using a 40 FPS, type of performance. Also today, Richard Ledbetter, who is the, one of the technical editors at Digital Foundry, he put up an article and he actually talked about this phenomenon of possibly us seeing the return of the 30 FPS games. This was a very, very interesting read and an interesting write-up from him. And I encourage everyone who's interested in knowing why you might be seeing some more 30 FPS games, to go ahead and check it out. I mean, here it is. It says why the return of the 30 FPS console game is inevitable. More ambitious games push hardware further, and, something has to give. So the ambition of the game is basically something that, really does come into perspective. He talked about even the Unreal Engine 5 Matrix demo running at 30 FPS. I didn't even really know that, but I thought something seemed like, yeah, it was a good experience, but I didn't even realize. And even he said the cinematics for that Matrix game in Unreal Engine 5 was running at 24 FPS. The cinematics in Gotham Knights, they run at 60 FPS on PC without any problems. And I'm certain that on console, they're probably running at their locked frame rates as well. And so you think about it, and his conclusion, basically seeing all of this, was that at the end of the day, there is something that these consoles are limited. And it's the final side of this particular article, his conclusion. I'm going to go ahead and read it in this video. He says, so as the cross-generation malaise gives way to titles only addressing the current consoles, we should expect to see fewer titles running at 60 frames per second. It is inevitable. 60 FPS is no longer an automatic given. For those who keep saying 60 FPS is the new standard, you really have to understand that it only depends on the game. If you want to achieve 60 FPS, you got to build your game from the ground up to where you know that it's going to be able to achieve that. But if your game goes to a whole different dimension, then now you're in unknown territory. And he says it becomes a design element developers need to work around and plan for more diligently. Based on what we've seen so far, I think the biggest surprise is that we are already seeing titles facing CPU challenges. In the case of Gotham Knights, it's difficult to understand why a relatively basic open world is causing these problems. But looking at A Plague Tale Requiem's multitude of rats, examining how CPU intensive Unreal Engine 5 is right now, even on high-end PCs, there are valid reasons as to why 60 FPS may not be attainable, and ultimately we need to trust the developers to deliver what's best for the game. And if performance really is a top priority, the PC platform is always there for you. And for this, I think he's spot on. He was a little, diplomatic here, but then he also missed something. And this is something that they also are not necessarily prioritizing, which is the network side of Gotham Knights. Gotham Knights has the open world untethered network aspect that brings a whole different paradigm to light. And I haven't necessarily seen a lot of people actually make, mention of a lot of this. I don't know if they missed it. I don't know if they are, addressing it. I don't know if they really want to address it. But in my opinion, I think it's definitely something that, as a gaming community, we really need to pay very close attention to, because if we don't pay attention to this, then, we rob ourselves of the knowledge of, going through these video games and not necessarily understanding fully exactly what it is that, you and I in the gaming world might be missing out on. And this is usually a thing. Now, it's not necessarily go buy a PC from my end, but it seems like that's what he's saying. But I strongly believe that at least knowing, you will now be in a better, more informed position to know how you want to handle your video games. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching. I left the links for this, all of this conversation here in the description below, so that you guys can actually check it all out. And let me hear your thoughts in the comment section, and hopefully we'll talk pretty soon in another one. Peace out.